The VP debate last night told you everything you needed to know about Kamala Harris. She has terrible instincts.
The biggest gut decision I've made most recently is to choose my running mate. Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Walz was supposed to be a normal Midwestern white guy and said this.
I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it.
What? Kamala's right-hand man told 40 million people he's become friends with school shooters. But he wasn't finished.
Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect, and I'm a knucklehead at times.
The question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor.
Kamala hired a knucklehead who's friends with school shooters to be a heartbeat away from the presidency. You can call that coup insurance. The assistant coach fumbled the ball twice in the first half and never recovered. The Democrats wanted an attack dog, and they got a bald basset hound nodding along to everything Vance said. Walz kept agreeing that American workers needed to be protected against cartels and big pharma. Good. And instead of appreciating American unity, the media said, come on, coach, just play the race card.
I think the civility that we saw tonight may be a mistake by Democrats, quite frankly. I talked at the outset of energizing this base. I was just in Ohio, and many Democrats were livid about what's going on in Springfield. I think Walz missed an opportunity to really push the racial insensitivity there. There was a sense of trying to be affable, as John said. And I think what we're going to see from this point on is the civility being laid aside.
Civility was a mistake. That's what the Democrats are saying. Walz was Minnesota nice instead of Minnesota nasty. He must not have gotten the memo. You can't be civil to a dictator. And not to be superficial, but did you know Walz is the same age as Greg? Kamala says she's the new generation of leadership. Last night, America saw J.D. Vance as the new generation. Young, bright, refreshing. And that's just what the ladies are saying. And unlike Walz, Vance came on stage with a theme. We're living in Kamala's world. If you don't like it, don't blame Trump.
What you won't hear is that Kamala Harris has already done it because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record.
Kamala's hiding her record and asking for a promotion that she doesn't deserve. At one point, Vance even sympathized with Walz for having to defend her.
What Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better.
Women I spoke to love that Vance talked about his family and came across as a common sense conservative who doesn't bow down and just do what he's told.
I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop. And we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
The experts lied to you about Biden's brain and lockdowns working, and that crime and border crossings were down, and that inflation's just about to go away. Vance showed an independent streak that made Americans trust him, and a compassionate side that made Americans like him. Even when he tangled with the moderators, it was done diplomatically.
Just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
we're
because
going to turn out of the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
And then the moderators are muting the mics when Vance tells the truth. I don't think that's why the mics were supposed to be muted. The last two debates, Trump and Vance have shown that they know the issues better than the moderators. These last four network moderators have been wrong about everything: crime, immigration, late-term abortion. They don't know anything. It's because they go in with just a note from a liberal producer that just says this is what's going to shut down the conversation. Little fake fact check. But instead of complaining about the media bias, JD kept the focus on you.
Every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies.
The J.D. Vance hoax is over. The media told you he was a creepy weirdo who offended women. But last night, Americans saw a polished, clean-cut, mature young man. You know, the kind of guy a girl can take home to their parents. That's why the media smeared him, so you wouldn't get to know him. They told you Vance was a bad pick, just to discourage you. And now we know he's the perfect balance for the Trump ticket. Last night enlarged the Republican Party. Women, independents, they liked what they saw. Moderate Republicans loved Vance. People see Vance as the future. Vance's presentation gives fence sitters a sense of security because Trump had a little trouble picking personnel the first time around. Now there's evidence that Trump will surround himself with high-quality people. And this goes without saying, but the base loved him. Loved. He humanized wings of the Republican Party, articulated the America First agenda exquisitely, and even softened Trump, if that was possible. Frank Luntz's focus group had Vance winning 12-2.
He's very battle-tested, very ready, and you can just see that he went to Yale, and he's very intelligent, and he reassured a lot of people, I think.
Somebody else.
It was in strong control of the facts. He ran the show.
He remained steady during the whole performance, and I was very impressed with him being very sincere and authentic.
He humanized himself and actually looked like a regular guy.
Vance even won over some on the left.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I thought that Vance really showed he's a very vibrant, brilliant young man who has total control of the issues. The system is broken, and as Senator Vance said, Harris could do something tomorrow. She could wake up in the morning and do something tomorrow. The change agent is really going back to the successful Trump administration. We can't hold out for the perfect. We have to vote for the good, and I think Trump would be the good.
Bottom line, Vance helped his ticket, Walz hurt his. Americans were delighted and pleasantly surprised by the respectful exchange of ideas. Imagine that. Voters don't want to see a cable news shootout on a presidential debate stage. Trump proved that he can spot talent. Harris proved that she can't. Democrats were somewhat satisfied with Walz, but not thrilled. He's not helping with men, whites, unions, and didn't shine under the lights. If her running mate's a knucklehead, who's she going to have in the cabinet? If she can't make good decisions for herself, how's she going to make a good decision for you? This race is very close, and small swings in momentum can make a huge difference just 5 weeks from Election Day. The Democrats are caught in an ugly news cycle now, and last night, it got worse.